column. What is this document, please?
There was a questionnaire that was drawn up for each of the suppliers, and this was a record of their responses in this clarification meeting.
Right. And so was this the questionnaire with the responses that were given during the feedback session with the relevant respective supplier? In this case, it was VR Laser.
That's correct.
And was it the same process followed in relation to the other two,
That's correct.
DCD and LMT? And you referred to that in your affidavit, and you've attached the list of questions and the answers in your further annexures. Is that right?
That's correct.
May I just ask, before we proceed to the next item in your affidavit, did it strike you as significant that each of them was dealt with separately in private question and answer feedback sessions rather than them all being in the same room at the same time?
No, it did not strike me as unusual. The questions were different for the different suppliers.
Now, and the process to be followed from a supply chain management process, that was not your responsibility, am I right?
That wasn't my responsibility, no.
All right, thank you. And then you refer in your affidavit to something that happened after these feedback meetings. They were given an opportunity to submit revised proposals based on the issues during the meetings. Now, they had already submitted proposals in 2012, which they were then asked to update in 2014. Is this now a further opportunity for them to update their proposals again?
That was a further opportunity.
Yes. Who decided on that? Was that the cross-functional team of which you were a member?
No, that was supply chain.
Well, that's supply chain itself. Was it unusual in your experience for supply chain to be asking parties who've already submitted proposals and then revised proposals to be given a further opportunity to revise their proposals further?
No, it was not, but this was the first time I was involved in such a process.
Okay. Now, were further revised proposals then received from these three interested parties?
Yes.
Can I take you, please, to page 422? Sorry, may I just have a moment? I'm not sure that that's a correct reference. Apologies, Chair. Bear with me, if you would.
This is going to be quite difficult to read. 422, you said.
I'm sorry, Chair?
Did you say 422?
Yeah, I said if you could just hold on. I think that is in fact a wrong reference. I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Yes, may I take you rather to page 393? Do you have that?
I've got that.
You refer to that in your affidavit as being the further revised proposal received by LMT in response to that invitation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then at 401, is that the further revised proposal from VR Laser?
That's correct.
And then 410, is that the further revised proposal from DCD?
That's correct.
Right. Now, you've referred in your affidavit for the Chair's assistance, it's paragraph 4.16 of the affidavit to the bid evaluation committee reconvening to do final scoring. Was that part, or were you part of that process?
I was part of that process, yes.
And what specifically were you required to assist in for scoring?
We did the scoring for the technical component of the bid evaluation.
Right. Can I take you back in your affidavit to page 245? You refer in paragraph 4.20 to a consolidated evaluation sheet, which we're going to look at in a moment. There was a weight allocated to each category of items. Price was 25%, functionality 45%, and triple BEE 30%. Now, you were looking at the technical side.
The functionality.
I'm sorry?
The functionality.
The functionality, yes. So it was the functionality with a 45% weighting for the scoring.
That's correct.
You were not involved in looking at price and what score to give to each of the bidders in their revised proposals. Is that correct?
That's correct. We did not look at the price or the triple BEE score that was populated by supply chain.
Okay, thank you. And then if we can just for completeness look at the document you refer to, can I take you to page 422? Is that the evaluation?
That's the one that I think
Yes,
I can't read.
That's where I was confused earlier.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. 422, this time is the correct reference, Mr. Dreven, as I understand it, but I'd like you to confirm, is that the consolidated evaluation sheet that is referred to as being the one that was populated through the scoring that was given by the team of which you formed part?
That's correct.
Okay, and you were presumably responsible for advising on what score would be appropriate for the functionality element when you compared the one bidder with the others.
That's correct.
Right.
Are you able to read what is written there, Mr. Irvin? Is there a better copy somewhere, or can it be made, or can this be enlarged?
It can be enlarged, Chair. We will
Can be
make sure
enlarged.
that is done.
Okay, all right. Would you struggle to read it, Mr. Trevor? As it is?
This is correct, yes.
Yes.
Um,
Okay, no, that's
I
fine.
can recognize it.
Yes, if it can be enlarged, then this can be replaced with one that is enlarged.
Thank you. We will
yeah.
attend to that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right.
I'm afraid some of the annexures in some of these affidavits do suffer from the same problem.
Yes,
But I
well,
don't believe that I need to take the witness through, and subject to your guidance as to the different components of the contents of this particular page.
no, that's fine, as long as we'll have an enlarged one.
We will certainly
in due
attend to
course. I had said last year or even the year before to the legal team that they need to make sure that they identify beforehand copies that are not legible and take steps to get legible ones or
Indeed.
get them enlarged. But I think it doesn't always happen.
I'm afraid
But
not.
at least if they can attend to that even after, then that would be better.
As you please, Chair.
Yes.
Thank
okay.
you. Now, may I take you back to page 246?
I'm there.
You refer to the scoring that was then done, and in 425, you refer to the scoring that shows that LMT came second in line by receiving an overall score of 64.78%, which was 0.76% less than VR Laser. But in relation to the price, I'm here now reading from your paragraph 4.25.2, LMT's financial offer was 165.6 odd million, making it the cheapest out of the three suppliers.
That's correct.
If we compare that with VR Laser, you deal with that in 4.23, and we see there in 423.1 that their price was in fact 262.4 odd million, which is almost 100 million more than the LMT offer.
That's correct.
Despite that, VR Laser was able, because of the weighting presumably of the factors, to beat LMT in terms of scoring by 0.76%. Now, you then deal in 4.26 with triple BEE credentials and scoring. Was that part of your duties and responsibilities?
No, it was not.
Okay. And we've heard evidence from previous witnesses dealing with this. Now, you refer in the next paragraph to a supplier audit having been done for the platform hull previously by Patria. Were you aware of that at the time, and what did this involve?
The supplier audit was part of the tasks that Patria were contracted to, and I knew about the report.
And was this an issue that related to your interest in functionality?
No, I did not take that into account.
Okay. Now, there was then a recommendation made, 4.28, made after the consolidated evaluation template was done that we've looked at. There was a submission to EXCO of DLS recommending that VR Laser should be awarded this Hoefyster contract for the platform hulls because it was the highest scoring bidder. Were you part of that process making that recommendation? Was that part of the cross-functional team that you were a member of?
No, our work stopped at finishing the evaluation.
The evaluation.
Mr. Draven, can I ask the question, what is your recollection of how big the gap was in terms of functionality between LMT and VR Laser in terms of scores?
Sorry, Chair, can you just repeat?
What is your recollection of the gap between the points you gave to LMT and the points you gave to VR Laser in terms of functionality? How big was that gap in terms of scoring them?
It was quite a significant gap.
It was quite a significant gap. Okay, all right. Thank you.
In favor of VR Laser?
In favor of VR Laser.
And can you just give very briefly a summary of why you scored them higher, VR Laser?
We had different questions to answer in the evaluation sheet, each which had its own score, and going through that process of answering each of these points, that was the end result.
Thank you.
In terms of scoring functionality, a bidder's experience would not count, would it? In other words, if LMT had done this type of job for some time and had experience, but VR laser didn't have any such experience, but maybe in terms of its responses in regard to functionality, to questions on functionality, you might be satisfied that it should get higher scoring compared to LMT, who might have some experience, but maybe have not responded to questions on functionality in a certain way.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Driven, your affidavit then goes on to, in paragraph 431, to refer to your becoming aware of press articles referring to links with the Guptas, and that you raised...
I'm sorry, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Dreven, you might not be able to answer this, but you will tell me. One would have thought that experience should count for something in this type of competition. You don't know whether it counted for anything, not necessarily on functionality, but on everything that was supposed to be taken into account.
Now, as far as I remember, when we did the scoring, it was not known that VR laser had a link.
Yes, but what I'm asking is, would you not agree that experience in doing a particular job should count for something when bidders compete to do a job? You know, somebody who has never done the job, that should be something to take into account compared to somebody who may have a track record of doing the job in a certain way, whether good or bad.
It would depend on if those resources were still available that had built up that experience.
Sorry?
It would depend on if the resources were still available. The knowledge was still, most of the knowledge is embedded in the people.
No. I'm just speaking now in general. I'm just saying, I see that in terms of scoring here, there is no reference to experience. You know, there is just the prize, functionality, and we have said that functionality here did not include history or experience. You know, so I'm just wondering why there would not be a factor or some points that should go to experience. But as I say, it might be something you are not able to answer. I'm just thinking if somebody says, I have experience of driving a bus for the past 15 years without any accidents, and somebody says, I just got my license to drive a bus yesterday, that it should count for something when you say, who do you give this job to? And it looks like here that there was no room for that.
There was no question for that in the evaluation.
Yes. I just find it strange. Oh, okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I might just pursue this for a moment.
Yes.
Mr. Driven, did you not find it strange that there was no question or scoring attached to the experience of a particular prospective contractor relating to its experience? Because as the Chair points out, is that not a relevant issue that you should consider when evaluating bids? To see not only is, for example, do they have a factory and do they have technicians and so forth, but do they actually have experience? Not just skills on paper or resources on paper, but actually a track record. Did you not find it strange that that was not being looked at?
There were certain aspects of that covered in the questions.
That covered in the questions?
Yeah, certain aspects.
And was that
you could, that would cover that indirectly.
But indirectly. But would it be taken into account when you're actually determining the scoring? because it's the scoring that ultimately is what gave VR Laser, by a marginal difference, a superior score to that of the others.
I think the relevant question in that regard was one about the capability, the current capability. And the
Yeah,
current
but capability is
capacity.
not the same as what Mr. Kennedy is asking. If you produce a driver's license that says you are permitted to drive a bus, and you got it yesterday, and I produce a driver's license that says I'm permitted to drive a bus, but I got it a long time ago, I've been driving for a long time, we are not on the same basis. If my experience has been, I've been doing that job well, that should count for something when I'm compared to you, who has no track record, even though we both have the ability to drive a bus and we are permitted to. You understand?
Yeah, I understand.
But now when you look at the scoring here, it says you score for price, you score for functionality, you score for triple BEE. And so I asked you earlier on whether when you score functionality, the question of experience or track record comes in. You said no, and I could understand that. But then obviously it can't come under price and it can't come under triple BEE. So it means, it seems to me, that no provision was made for giving points to experience or a good track record of doing this job. That's how it seems to me. Does that accord with your understanding of what it was at the time?
The questions on the bid evaluation did not specifically cover experience, but indirectly it covered the capabilities, the
Yes.
current capabilities.
Yes, then Mr. Kennedy's question arises, he was asking whether you did not find that strange, that there was no provision to give points in relation to experience or track record.
No, it felt like all the aspects were covered by the questions in the bid evaluation.
Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you. I think I've taken it as far as I can on this aspect.
Yes.
If I may proceed then, Chair. Mr. Driven, may I then take you please to page 476?
I found it.
Right. Now, at the top of that page, we see an email from you addressed to Ms. Avishkar Govender. Who is she?
He was the.
Or is it he? I'm sorry.
That's he was responsible for the overall program management on both phase 1 and phase 2.
Right. We're going to look at in a moment at what you said in the email, that you refer in that email to something that appears below. There's an email below from Mr. Govender, and then below that he appears to be forwarding what appears at the foot of the page, which is an email that originated from Heinz van der Merwe, addressed to Mr. Steyn, Mr. Cartwright, Mr. Cook, Mr. Libber, Mr. Klappertjie, Mr. Govender, and Mr. van den Heever. Did you come into possession of this email? Were you aware of this one at the bottom that refers to a media article?
I received it, my superior, Mr. Govender, CC'd it to me. If you look at the middle of the page,
Yes.
I'm part of the PCPO group.
That's if you look at the email from Mr. Govender on the 7th of July. It's addressed to Infantry Systems Management, PCPO, and Celia Malashlela. So you are part of PCPO.
That's correct.
Right. Now, we can read for ourselves the media article. The heading appears in bold at the foot of page 476. It says, Guptas and Duduzane Zuma are hidden stakeholders in a strategic locomotive subcontracting company bought while the main tender process was ongoing. And then it refers in the text under the photograph of the chairperson of Transnet's board tender committee, Mr. Iqbal Sharma. It then in the text of the article refers to the VR Laser Services Company and connections with Mr. Rajesh Gupta and Mr. Duduzane Zuma. Is this the article that then was the reason that jolted you into sending your email at the top of page 476?
That's correct.
Right. Now, may I just read out the brief text that you set out in your email? You say, I have this fear that if we go with VR, now that's VR laser, is that correct?
That's correct.
That at the end we will still be forced by Denel to change to LMT. Possibly after the TOT has happened. What does TOT mean?
Transfer of technology.
Transfer of?
Technology.
Technology, thank you, has happened, which will make it even worse. Now, when you say if we go with VR laser, are you referring to what we've just been discussing about the scoring of the proposals received in relation to the platform hull contract for Hoefyster?
That's correct.
Right. Then your email says that the below input, is that the emails and the press article that we see below?
That's correct.
That the below input and the low price LMT quoted, we dealt with that earlier, was that 160 odd million compared with VR laser almost 100 million higher. That what you're referring to?
That's correct.
Yes. Then to continue brings me to a point where I get the feeling that we go with LMT. Were you suggesting that rather the decision should be taken by the senior management, instead of awarding it to VR laser, it should go to LMT?
That's correct.
Okay. You were not in your job vested with the power to make that decision, but this was a recommendation, was it, to your colleague, Mr. Govender, that it should be reconsidered, the award to VR laser?
No, it wasn't within my power.
It was what?
It wasn't within my power.
It wasn't within your power. But you could still express your views, correct?
Yes.
And that's what you were doing here. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. And then you say, apart from that we go with LMT, avoid fallout from Denel, avoid possible fallout from this potential debacle. What debacle were you referring to there?
The one at the Transnet transaction.
Right. And spend the difference in price to get LMT up to standard with sufficient space, facilities and resources to handle the platform hull manufacturing. This last part, what were you referring to there? Just expand on that, please.
LMT at that stage did not have sufficient space. They had moved to a smaller facility, so they would have needed to get more space to be able to manufacture the platform hull and then outfit it so that it becomes a facility.
Right. And you were suggesting that the difference in price be used to help LMT get up to standard. Was that the difference in price between VR laser at 260 odd million compared with LMT about 100 million less than that?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you just conclude just a thought. Now, was there any response to that from Mr. Govender or anybody else in management?
We discussed it in the corridor and asked the question that should should the whole process go ahead, because at that time the contract was not yet awarded. It took a long time for the contract to be awarded.
Yeah.
And what came out of those discussions was that we cannot just take them out of the equation without them being blacklisted.
Sorry, without them being
Blacklisted.
blacklisted. I see. All right, thank you. Now I'd like to proceed to the next topic that you deal with in your affidavit, and that deals with a different contract. We've already dealt with the platform hull contract for the vehicles. Now we're going to move to the single source supplier appointment to provide for turret FCMs and related armor steel components. Now, you've referred in your affidavit to an instruction you received from Mr. Teubus, it's Vernon Teubus, to prepare a motivation. Mr. Teubus, how did he fit into the organization compared with you?
Mr. Teubus was if I remember correctly, the COO at the time, and he was Avishkar Govinda's superior.
Right. And and he was the COO, Chief Operating Officer, correct?
Correct.
Of which entity? Would that be still Denel Land Systems, DLS?
That would be
Not the corporate head office, but DLS as the division?
DLS.
Okay. And what was his instruction to you?
That I should prepare a justification for the single source supply of this limited basket of critical components where the interfaces are very critical and problematic.
Were these components something in addition to what was dealt with in the platform hull contract? It was separate from that?
It was separate from that.
Okay, thank you. Now can I take you please to page 484? .484 and following. Could you please tell us what these documents are?
Page 484, that is my email to Celia with the draft of the motivation.
Yes, the text of your email, round about the middle of page 484, reads, "Hi Celia, find attached a motivation for single source supply of Hoefyster turret armor steel fabrications and components." And he refers to a signed copy being sent, being delivered. And so was this what you prepared in response to the instruction that you got from Mr. Teubus?
That's correct.
Were you aware how it came about that he gave you that instruction and why it was now being considered appropriate that a single source supplier should be appointed?
No, I was unaware of the processes behind the screens.
Right. Now, I need to take you back, please, to your affidavit, where you've summarized your reasons for the motivation. If I can take you to page 248. Paragraph 5.2. You have that?
Yes?
You say, "I prepared the motivation, emailed it to Ms. Celia Malashlela. As can be noted from the attachment, the justification for the single source supply included the following." And then you refer to a number of technical aspects and features of the components and why there was a recommendation. Do you confirm these were your reasons?
These were my reasons.
Right. And then you say 522, as one of the reasons, you refer to certain processes being specialized, and you recommended that the supplier to be chosen should have all of these processes in-house. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then your further recommendation in 523 was that the chosen supplier have an in-house machining facility or a close relationship with a supplier of such services, as DLS has in the past experienced lengthy delays and resultant schedule overruns because of the lack thereof. Were you referring to a particular supplier or suppliers in recording your concern about bad experiences in the past?
These were the first of the engineering development models, where there was a delay from finishing the welded structure to having it machined.
Right. Was LMT involved in that?
LMT was involved in that.
Right. And then you say in 524, it was highly recommended that a supplier be chosen with a proven track record of manufacturing armor steel structures, e.g. hulls, delivering on time to the required quality standards. Now, were the reasons that you were putting forward here, especially the last two, were you in any way suggesting that LMT should be eliminated and that VR laser should be favored?
No, I specifically wrote the motivation so that the supplier that would be chosen is open-ended.
Had you been asked by Mr. Terbis or anybody else to write the motivation in a way that favored one supplier rather than another?
No, these were my reasons.
Now, you then deal in 5.3 with particular aspects being focused on only addressing the turret interfacing components, and you give the explanation. But I think we can move rather to 5.4, where you say that the motivation was limited to the real technical risks on which you had real concerns about beforehand. Just explain to the chair what your real concerns were. Was it the concerns about the capacity and experience and track record and so forth that you really dealt with, or was it a different point?
The main concern was that these components fit together in the proper way. Being all welded structures, the tolerances is a big problem.
Right.
To maintain between these assemblies, and in the past with other types of assemblies where this was a factor. If something doesn't fit, then it's always a question of who's responsible.
Right.
Which takes quite a time to sort out. So if you have it at one place, then that one supplier is responsible no matter what.
Right. Now, you continue then to say this: the motivation did not recommend the appointment of a specific supplier to attend to the works, more specifically the appointment of VR laser, and was written such that, to the best of my knowledge, did not exclude the use of another supplier. Why do you mention here that you were avoiding recommending VR supply and rather trying to keep it open for any potential supplier? Had VR supplier's name come up in relation to this single source project?
No.
Not. So why is it that you mention that here?
This is just my motivation behind writing the motivation was not. I specifically wrote it not to specify a supplier.
Yes,
because I did not feel comfortable in specifying a supplier.
right. And you, in fact, I felt uncomfortable in recommending a specific suppliers. I did not have direct first-hand experience with issues such as quality of supply to date of applicable suppliers, etc. This was echoed by the then supply chain executive, Ms. Malashlela, who was of the opinion that the requirement goes out on tender. And did you think that that was a good idea,
So,
going out on tender?
yes,
Yeah. And then you explain in 5.5 how it came about that you'd identified specific technicalities. But we then come in 5.6 to your later learning that the motivation that you had prepared, that's the document we've just been looking at, correct?
that's correct.
That became used as a basis to conclude a memorandum of agreement between DLS and VR Laser Services, where it was appointed in May 2015 as a single source supplier for the provision of all fabricated steel services and goods, such as fabrication of hulls, turrets, FCMs, and fabricated armor steel structures. Now, there are a couple of issues I need to question you on that. You refer to VR Laser Services being appointed on the strength of your motivation. Correct? That was used, your motivation had been used by others to justify the appointment of VR Laser.
Yes, it was part of the motivation.
You've just told the chair, though, that in your motivation you specifically didn't recommend anybody, whether VR Laser Services or anybody else.
That's correct.
And you raised some concerns with Ms. Malashlela that we've already dealt with, and she then, as the head of supply chain management within DLS, felt that it should go out to tender.
That's correct.
Do you know whether it went out to tender?
I don't know, but I doubt it.
You doubt it. Right. She's given evidence in relation to that she's already heard. How did you feel? Did you feel surprised? Was this something you expected, that VR Laser was appointed apparently on the strength of your motivation?
I was especially surprised that to the extent of the MOU.
MOA or MOU?
MOA or MOU,
MOU.
because I was focused on just specific components.
Right. Now, if the contract had in fact been put out to open tender, as Ms. Malashlela had suggested would be done, would you have been involved in evaluation of the tenders once they came in, at least from the technical side?
I don't know.
You don't know. So it could have involved others. Now, the other point that I'd like to look at here is that you refer in this paragraph 5.6 to what VR Laser Services was appointed to do as a single source supplier. It would provide all fabricated steel services and goods, such as the fabrication of hulls, turrets, FCMs. Just remind us what FCMs mean.
The FCM is the fighting compartment module, but it is a term that also refers to sometimes what we call the turret hull. And I think you would have run across another term, trunnion machining. That's basically the same component.
Trunnion machine.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. And then the other example that you give is fabricated armor steel structures. Now, was this the same scope of different components that was the subject of your motivation? The written motivation that we looked at earlier?
In terms of armored steel components, yes.
Was it exactly the same as the range of components or products that you dealt with in your motivation? Was it less than or more than?
It was more than.
More than. So are you saying then, are you saying that VR Laser Services was given the contract for single source supplier supply of components that went further than the components that you had looked at in your motivation.
That's correct.
Do you know how that came about?
Well, unfortunately, I listened to the testimony of Celia
Yes.
on Monday, so there I became
You're aware of her evidence?
Yes.
Yes. But you don't have your own knowledge as to what others may have done, why they used your motivation that dealt with products A, B, and C, that then was used as a basis to award VR Laser a contract for sole supply of A, B, C, D, E, and F as well.
No, not before Monday. Tuesday.
Not before Monday, thank you. And were you ever consulted by Mr. Tirbus or anybody else to say, Mr. Dreven, I want you to analyze and motivate by way of an additional motivation document for the additional products? Did they ever
No.
come back to you for that?
No, I was not.
Are you aware whether they asked anybody else to do that?
I'm not aware of anybody else.
Do you believe
Being
that?
asked.
Sorry?
I'm not aware of anybody else being asked.
It was asked. Would there have been anybody else who could potentially be asked, or were you the only only person in the organization who would have been appropriate to ask?
There's a slight possibility that the program manager on the other program, AV8,
Okay.
could have contributed.
But would you have expected, because you'd done a motivation for the first lot of products, that you would have been approached to deal with the second lot as the further products as well, the additional items?
Yes, I would expect
Okay.
that.
Now, thank you. Still on your affidavit, page 250, paragraph 6. Sorry, before I should have just asked this final question on the last topic, Chair, if I may just go back to that.
Yes.
Are you able to tell the Commission to what extent the additional items made a difference? In other words, was it just a couple of very minor items in addition to those items that you had dealt with in your written motivation, or was it a substantial, a major or a minor add-on, as it were, to the original items you dealt with?
The value of the separate components
Yeah,
was minor,
was minor,
but the whole basket would have added up to quite a bit.
quite a lot. Thank you. Now we come to the value of the orders placed on VR Laser from 2014 to date under the Hoefeister contract. Now, which contract are you referring to, the single source supplier contract or the earlier one for the platform hulls?
I did a breakdown of the orders that VR Laser received before the hull contract was placed, the platform hull contract, and then in the interim from the platform hull contract up to the MOU, and then after the MOU.
So it's in
So
fact the entire range, is it?
That's the entire range.
Right, thank you. May I ask you please to turn to page 538. Again, Chair, I'm afraid for those of us with eyesight problems, the printing is a bit small. I think one can make it out.
Yes,
It's
it
not
should-
ideal. Would
it
you
should
like us
be
to
enlarged.
replace these pages with enlarged copies?
Yeah,
May
it
we
should
do
be
that?
enlarged.
Okay, I found it.
We don't need to go into the detail of this, but these are pages that go on for many, many pages in the bundle. It runs from 538 to 599, and there are tables that have in pretty small print various columns, amounts, items, and so forth. Can you just tell us in broad outline, Mr. Dreven, what is this document?
This is a financial report from the DLS system.
And what does it tell us? What is the purpose of the report?
This was the report from which I extracted the information.
And what information were you able to extract? What does it tell us? Was this for purposes of responding to the request from the Commission to give a value as to the business that was given to VR Laser Services in relation to these contracts from 2014 to date?
That's correct.
Right. And are you able to tell us what the total is? It appears, if I'm right, to be set out at page 598. Well, that particular schedule, there's separate schedules that set out the various prices, but can you just give us the totals on page 598? Are you able to see that?
Not clearly.
No, I'm afraid it's difficult for me, and you haven't spelt out in your affidavit what the total is. But Chair, may we give you the reassurance that we will provide a legible copy of that
Yes,
as soon
okay.
as possible.
Okay.
Thank you. May I just have a moment?
Yes.
My learned colleague, Ms. Molefe, has drawn to my attention a point in the papers that relates to the question that was posed by the Chair earlier about experience.
Yes.
May I take you, please, Mr. Dreven, to page 392.
Yes.
Mr. Dreven, are you there?
Yes.
In fact, this appears to be the questionnaire relating to questions raised with LMT. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay, and then if I might direct your attention to paragraph 4, it says 9.1, taking LMT track record into consideration, what has LMT done to improve? And then the response is the Patria data pack is fixed and will not have any reason to cause delay as for the previous DLS contracts. Did you receive that response from them as recorded or summarized in that column?
That's correct.
And what did this relate to? Just explain, please. What did you understand this to be?
With a previous order that was placed on LMT, and I take this to be the AV8 Taratal order. There were changes from the NEL side, as well as reasons from LMT side, why the project overran its schedule.
Right. Were you satisfied with that answer?
Yes,
Did you believe that they gave a proper explanation that reassured you, that explained the previous, that the previous problems already experienced would not recur, would not happen again if they were to get the new business?
that's correct.
And of course, we've already seen when we
I'm
looked
sorry,
at...
was that answer no or was it yes?
He said yes.
Oh, okay.
Is that correct, Mr. Dreven? You said yes,
Yes,
right? And I took you earlier to your email where you commented about the allegations that had been made in the media article. You remember your email to Mr. Govender. And you had then suggested that LMT should in fact be awarded that contract because although they had previous issues and they now had moved to smaller premises, you could perhaps do a deal with LMT where, at least using the difference in price between VR Laser and LMT, that could perhaps be used. You could perhaps increase their price to allow them to expand their operations, etc.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Chair, those are the questions of the team for this witness. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to complete the issue that we talked about earlier, Mr. Trevin, am I right to say, on the one hand, there were three factors which were supposed to be scored: price, functionality, triple BEE. But the questions that were asked seem to have gone much wider than those factors. And it seems to me that if you got a certain answer on a question that didn't relate to price or functionality or triple BEE, whether you were satisfied or not satisfied with it, in the end, it would not count for any points that you would allocate, because you were only allowed to allocate points for the three, namely price, functionality, triple BEE, and in your case, your concern was functionality and nothing else. Is my understanding right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Trevin, for coming to assist the Commission. We appreciate it very much. If we need you, we'll ask you to come back again. Okay.
Chair, would this be a convenient time to take a short adjournment, if that's...
Yes, we'll take the tea adjournment. It might not be as short as it usually is. It might be extended a little bit, because there is something I need to attend to.
As you please, Chair.
So we might be 25 minutes or so.
Thank you,
But
Chair.
if I get ready before that, you'll
Thank
be
you, Chair.
told. Yeah. We adjourn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Driven. You did well. Thank you. Sorry?
Signor Mizio Bonanan, King, the tone of villainy.
I've taken much longer than I thought I would. But are you ready, Mr. Kennedy?
Yes, we're ready. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's continue.
Chair, I know that you have issues later in the day, as you've indicated previously, other commitments. May we just indicate we will be as quick as we can, and we are still optimistic we can finish by 5.
Okay, well, I can tell you that I think if need be, we can go over 5, maybe up to 5:30.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank,
all right.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
This witness will take some time, but I hope not too long, and then the next
Yes.
witness should actually be fairly quick.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
So with your leave, Chair, may we then ask ask leave to call our next witness, Mr. Hendrik Johannes Christoffel van den Heever.
Yes, thank you. Please administer the oath of affirmation. I just place on record that the interpreter has been sworn in.
Please state your full names for the record.
Stel asseblief die volle name vir die rekord.
Hendrik Johannes Christoffel van Heever.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
Neem nie enige Nou,
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
ag u die eed om bindend te wees op u gewete?
Ja,
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Ja, u
we'll
sê
have to
nou-
start afresh. Mr. van den Heever, do you need the oath to be interpreted or you can understand English sufficiently?
ek kan
In terms of the oath, because it's very important, we can't take a chance that later on you might say you didn't understand parts of the oath.
net English voor gestart, ja.
Okay, all right, continue.
Please state your full names for the record.
Hendrik Johannes Christoffel van den Heever.
Do you have any objections to taking the prescribed oath?
No,
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
yes,
Do you swear that the evidence will give it with the truth, the whole truth and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
so help me God.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kennedy, you want to just place on record what's
Yes.
going to happen about the interpreter and so
Yes,
on?
may we do so.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. May I then place on record that we had a consultation with Mr. van den Heever a week or so ago. It was conducted in English virtually over Zoom or Teams. And we're aware that Mr. van den Heever does not have English as his first language. Afrikaans is his first language. And we're aware that sometimes he has to be a bit careful with understanding the English, but overall, he has if I may say so, Mr. van den Heever, a pretty good, workable command of English, and you were very helpful to us, and we appreciate that. At one stage, Chair, it was indicated to us that Mr. Van den Heever would prefer an interpreter to be present to interpret. And we engaged in discussions with his legal team, particularly Mr. Pillay of the attorney's firm who represents Mr. van den Heever, who are actually present, Mr. Pillay and Ms. Wilsnach. And we reached an agreement, as I understand it, that the interpreter will be here not to interpret every word of every question or every word of every answer, but the interpreter can be used if Mr. van den Heever does not understand anything particular that is put to him in English. He will also, as far as he's able to, answer the questions in English, but if he struggles, he will call on the interpreter. And so that is what we have arranged with Mr. van den Heever with his attorney's assistance. And may I just place on record our appreciation to the attorneys who've played a professional role in this and in all other regards. Thank you, Chair. If that's acceptable to you, we would like to proceed.
No,
on that basis.
that's fine with me. Maybe his legal representatives should place themselves on record and then confirm that arrangement. Yeah, you can do so from where you are if you just switch on the mic.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
My name is Yukesh Pillay. And I confirm what Advocate Kennedy has conveyed to you this morning.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank
And you represent Mr. van den Heever?
Mr. Van den Heever, that's correct.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chair, and we appreciate
Thank you.
Mr. Pillis.
And Mr. van den Heever, you confirm as well that you understand the arrangement?
100%, Chair.
Okay, thank you. If you struggle, you have a problem, just say so, and the interpreter is available, will assist. But if you are able to understand and you are able to answer in English, it's fine.
Thank you. I'll do so, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chair. May I add something to the Chair's point to you now, Mr. van den Heever? I will try to be careful and clear in everything that I put to you. But if you don't understand anything, either because you didn't hear, or your mind was racing ahead with something else, or you didn't understand the English, please just immediately say, can you repeat it, can you explain it? And I will then try and explain it, and if that's not possible, then Ms. Oosthuizen, the interpreter, is here to assist you. So please take comfort from those reassurances. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. van den Heever, you confirm you did in fact consult with the legal team that I'm part of with my learned colleagues behind a week or a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
And is it correct that we consulted with you in respect of 2 affidavits that you have helpfully provided to the Commission?
That's correct, yes.
And that was after you were asked questions by the investigators team of this Commission?
That's correct, yes.
Right. Before you should have a file. Yes, I see you do. And your 2 affidavits appear in the file, but I'm going to ask you to confirm that in a moment. Can you please, Chair, may I just place on record, we're now referring again to Denel Bundle 04.
Yes.
And here we are going to deal with Exhibit W14. And W14, Chair, we'll take the witness to this in a moment, includes 2 affidavits. The one appears, Mr. van den Heever, will you just follow with me on this, please? Just look on the top left-hand side. There are numbers. I'm going to just refer to the last digit. Number 5, page 5, that's your 1 affidavit. Is that correct?
That's correct,
That's
yes.
in divider A. And then if you turn to page 83, you will find your other affidavit. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Now may I take you in the first affidavit to where you signed it, and if I can take you please to page 23.
Yes, I'm there.
Is that your signature at the foot of the page?
That's my signature, yes.
You signed it in front of a Commissioner of Oaths. We see that on page 24. Do you confirm that?
That's correct, yes.
Now, before we ask you to confirm that the affidavit that we've just looked at is correct, may I just ask you, is it correct that during the consultation you alerted us to, I'm sorry, may I just have a moment? Is it correct that during the consultation that we recently had, you alerted us to some errors that you had picked up that you want to place on record?
That's correct, yes.
Right. Sorry, my lord. Chair, may I just have a moment? Yes, it's at page 14. Do you have that?
I've got it, yeah.
Paragraph 24.
That's correct.
Just to get our thoughts on this, you say, I submit it was obvious during this time the DLS was in negotiations with LMT on providing financial assistance to LMT. I say so because in some of the email trails appeared discussions pertaining to the financial challenges they sought to eliminate through the prepayment. it was apparent that DLS was to provide the financial assistance through a prepayment that I had to structure under the Trunnion machining contract. Now, do you recall you raised a problem with this and you asked us to note a correction? Do you remember what the correction was that you asked us to do?
Yes.
Just tell the chair, please.
I'd like to change that to state that the prepayment had to be structured and not I had to structure.
Oh, okay.
So you want to delete the word I, and you want to insert the word be before structure, and you want to amend the word structure to read structured. So this line will read payment that had to be structured under the Trunnion machining contract.
That's correct, yes.
Right, thank you.
And then, Mr. Kennedy, just a small supplementary affidavit can be done to say, to effect the corrections. Because,
We can do that.
because one can't amend an affidavit.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay.
We will attend to that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. van den Heever, I don't recall that in this affidavit, I'm not talking about the other affidavit, as I don't recall any other corrections that you felt needed to be made. Are you able to tell the Chair, is there anything else in this affidavit you feel the need to raise for correction?
Currently not, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you confirm that you have gone through this affidavit, you know what's in it, and you confirm that it sets out the facts as you know them?
That's correct, yes.
Right, thank you. Chair, we will then ask for this affidavit formally to be admitted. We'll deal with the other affidavit in a moment, but may we ask then for the formal admission of this affidavit? It's in bundle Denel 04, exhibit W14, from page 5.
We'll have to have a different exhibit number for the other one. So you must consider whether we should make this one exhibit W14.1 or W14 and the other one W15.
Yes, the W15 has already been allocated by those
So
responsible.
we should make it 14, this one 14.1, the other one 14.2.
As you please, Chair.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
The statement stroke affidavit by Mr. Hendrik Johannes Christophiel van den Heever, starting at page 5, is admitted and will be marked as exhibit W14.1.
Thank you, Chair. Now, Mr. van den Heever, the other affidavit should be found at the marker B, if your file has a marker B, and you'll find it at page 83.
I've got it.
Right? Am I right in understanding this is the second affidavit, the front page bearing your name?
That's correct, yes.
And turn please to page 113.
I'm there.
Is that your signature again at the top of the page?
That's correct, yes.
And again, you signed in front of a Commissioner of Oaths.
That's correct.
And is it correct that you've raised, both in our consultation and since, a few issues that you want to correct?
That's correct, yes.
If I can ask you please to turn to page 101. Is it correct that you alerted me to an error that you'd picked up in paragraph 55.5?
That's correct, yes.
55, just to give the context, is you gave a list here in your affidavit of the people who formed the BEC, the Bid Evaluation Committee, correct?
That's correct, yes?
And you alerted us as the legal team to an error in paragraph 55.5.
That's correct, yes.
Is it Mr. or Ms. Koza?
It's Mr. Koza.
And what was the error?
It states that he was from Infantry Systems Department, but he's actually from Finance Department.
Right, thank you. And then on the following page, 102, is it correct that you alerted us to a spelling error in 55.8? It should read Mr. Rakadukwe with a K before the W. His name appears in other documents.
I'm not sure if it's Rakadukwe or Rakaduwe. I think it is Rakaduwe. I'm not.
Okay, thank you. And then if I can ask you to turn to page 111, 111.
Yes.
In paragraph 93, you say the following, attached here to is Annexure HVD 036 is a spreadsheet containing the list of purchase orders that I, as a buyer within the supply chain department of DLS, had issued in favor of VR Laser from the years 2009 until 2018. Total value of orders placed on VR Laser for this period was 345,849,877 rand 82 cents. That's what your affidavit says.
That's correct.
Is it correct that we as a legal team have been alerted by through the kind assistance of your attorneys to the fact that you wanted to correct that by way of a supplementary affidavit?
So I was requested to amend the spreadsheet to indicate the value up to the end of March
March of which year?
2014.
2014.
That's correct.
So in fact, that came at the request from who?
I think it was Carol, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, by members of the legal team. Thank you. And is it correct that you have provided a supplementary statement?
I have, yes.
And we're going to deal with that a little later, if we may, Chair. That is not currently before you in the file. That only came to us this morning, and it has not yet taken the form of a commissioned affidavit. There were some problems in that regard.
Okay.
I have to burden you with other problems that have burdened us, Chair, but we hope we can deal with them. May we just indicate...
We shall share the burden.
I'm sorry?
We shall share the burden.
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, it emerged only yesterday from the bundle that has been provided and handed to you, Chair, that some of the annexures in the photocopying process for the packaging of these bundles, for some reason we're not sure,
they were left out or something.
And they didn't find their way into the bundle.
Oh, okay.
Chair, there are two ways that we propose dealing with it. We don't believe that it should detain us in asking questions of this witness, because only certain annexures are going to be referred to in the questions, at least as I'm anticipating. And the annexures that I would have liked to have taken to Mr. van den Heever to comment on happen to be annexures to the affidavit of Mr. Dreven, the witness who you've just heard, who deals with some issues that overlap with that of Mr. van den Heever. Those happily are to be found in the same file. So with your leave, may we then refer to those pages where it is fine. Relevant?
Yeah.
But the second solution that we propose is this, that a complete copy of the affidavit as provided by Mr. van den Heever with all of the correct annexures will be provided by the Secretariat. In fact, I believe that they are dealing with that now, but we don't want to detain you further in this regard. Okay. So we apologize on behalf of our team and the and the Secretariat, but
Yes.
if, with your leave, may we continue on that
Yeah, no,
rather
that-
complicated basis?
That's fine. Let's continue on that basis.
Thank you very much. I'd like, so I think I just need to ask you, Chair, I
To
don't believe
admit
I have
this affidavit.
yes, if you would accept the second of Mr. van den Heever's affidavits from page 83 of bundle the NEL 04, which should be admitted, we would suggest as exhibit W14.1, point 2.
Point 2, yeah. The statement stroke affidavit of Mr. Hendrik Johannes Christoffel van den Heever, starting at page 83, is admitted and will be marked as exhibit W14.2.
Thank you, Chair. And then I've mentioned the supplementary statement that is not yet in the form of an affidavit. We're going to deal with its contents a little later, if we may, and then ask for at least the statement to be handed in provisionally to you, but we'll do that at that stage. I'm told by our learned friends who appear for Mr. van den Heever that apparently there were some logistical problems, but they have given an undertaking that they will ensure that that is transformed into a commissioned affidavit as soon as possible, and that will then be introduced into your own bundle, Chair.
Yeah.
But we don't believe that we should have a difficulty, subject to your decision, in taking him through what is currently an unattested
Yeah.
statement,
No,
which
no,
can
that's-
then be
that's-
confirmed in due course.
Yeah, that would be fine. After all, he will be testifying under oath.
Exactly.
But just for convenience, it would be good to have that commissioned.
Thank you, Chair. That will be done.
Okay, all right.
And may we propose that when that is included in the bundle, should, in an attested form, would be included as Exhibit 14.3.
Yes, it will be admitted as 14.3.
Thank you, Chair.
Actually, exhibit W 14.3.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, all right.
Right. Now, Chair, with your leave, may we then ask questions of this witness, first with his second statement that appears in the bundle. It just seems to flow nicely from some of the earlier evidence that you've just
Yes.
heard.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Mr. van den Heever, may we take you first to your affidavit that starts at page 83?
Right.
And maybe I should say, Mr. Governor, I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Kennedy. It's 1:45 now. Maybe we can proceed up to 1:15, so we
Thank
have
you.
about 30 minutes
Thank you, Chair.
before we take the lunch break.
That would help. Thank
Yeah.
you, Chair.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Right, Mr. van den Heever, this affidavit deals mainly with the platform hulls contract, which was given to VR Laser. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, your current employer is Denel, the division DLS. Is that right?
That's correct.
When did you start at Denel?
January 1982.
Before it was even called Denel. What was it called then?
It was called Littleton Engineering Works at that stage.
Right. And what was your job title when you started in 1982?
I started as an artisan, firstly as a epi trainer, and then as artisan, and
Right.
followed my way up.
And then you've moved up the ranks in Denel. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
You refer in paragraph 5, page 84, to working in the planning office at one stage.
That's
And then you moved to the supply chain management department as a buyer, where you had 22 years experience as a buyer
That's correct.
or a senior buyer, and then other titles, commodity specialist and procurement officer. What is your current title?
I'm currently with production planning. I've moved on back to production planning again.
Right, so you left supply chain management after 22 years and now you're in production.
That's correct.
Thank you. Now you refer to your training on page 85. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Paragraph 7, and then you set out in paragraph 8 your duties in supply chain.
That's correct.
Because your affidavit is dealing with issues relating to the Hoefyster contract for platform hulls given to VR Laser at the time that you were in supply chain.
That's
Is
correct.
that right? Thank you. Now, may I take you to page 86? After setting out the purpose of the statement, which was to respond to specific issues raised by the Commission's investigators, you then set out in paragraph 10 the standard procurement procedure at DLS at the time. Is that right?
That's correct.
And were you, in fact, running the process from the day-to-day point of view for procurement in relation to the contract that we've just mentioned?
Can you just explain that to me?
What was your involvement, particularly in the supply chain management department, dealing with the Hoefyster project?
I was just responsible for placing the orders according to the procedures, prescribed procedures and stuff.
And did that include the Hoefyster contract that was awarded to VR Laser for platform hulls?
Oh, that's correct, yes.
Right. Now, if we can turn to page 89, your paragraph 12 deals with a delegation of authority. And this was a delegation of authority applicable, you say, in paragraph 12 at DLS after 27 November 2012.
That's correct.
Right? And it gives the range of different prices that are the value of particular contracts within specific ranges. There would have to be specific levels of authority. And 12.5, you say all purchase orders above 5 million rand threshold required approval by the Exco Procurement Committee.
That's correct.
Right. Now, we've heard evidence that DLS was a division along with others within Denel Group. Correct?
That's correct, yes.
And is it correct that Denel Group had its own procurement policy?
Yeah, but I think ours was derived from it. I'm not 100% sure.
Yes. In fact, we've heard evidence that it was based on that. And that the Denel Group policy imposed a requirement that above a certain value, contracts had to be approved by certain levels. And are you aware that the Denel Group policy required that a contract over the value of 200 million would require approval by the Denel Corporate Board?
It became known to me.
Right. So what you're referring to in 12.5 is simply that within the division, a contract for a purchase order for more than 5 million rand would require Exco Procurement Committee's approval.
That's correct, yeah.
But you became aware that in addition to that, the board would also have to approve a contract above 200 million.
That's correct, yes.
Right. Okay, now in the next section of your affidavit, and with your leave, Chair, I'm going to go through it very selectively, so we don't waste time, because you've had a fair bit of evidence about the background.
Yes, I had a lot of evidence.
Thank you. You refer to Armscor awarding DLS a contract for the 217 hulls, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And then you explain the process, the rest of the page, and then you refer at the top of your next page, 91, in paragraph 17, to a situation in 2011 when DLS sought to contract a supplier to manufacture and deliver the platform hulls, the platform hulls contract. So this was one element of what needed to be provided by Denel to Armscor. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Now, you then refer to LMT. And LMT had a majority shareholding was bought by DLS in LMT at a certain stage. What was your understanding as to what LMT, whether LMT would participate in work such as this in general before we get to the specific contract. LMT was now majority owned and controlled by Denel, correct?
I think it was still in process at that stage. I'm not sure if they were already part of it.
Okay. Was there any need, from what you understood, to give LMT this work for the 217 platform hulls?
The fact that he is part of Denel, I felt that the money is kept in Denel if it was given to them.
Right.
But going out on the 3 quotations that we did, as we will see later on,
Yeah.
changed the route of what was happening.
Okay, we'll get to why that route was followed and where it led you to. You refer in this paragraph to this. You say LMT had been acquired to make it a more complete manufacturer of an armored vehicle. However, due to various factors such as concerns with the quality of services rendered by LMT, DLS management decided to do something. We'll deal with what they decided in a moment. Were you aware that there were concerns about quality on the part of LMT?
I was aware of issues, yes.
Am I right in understanding that you're not a technical person in the sense of, for example, being an engineer who would know the ins and outs of quality issues?
No, I disagree.
I beg your pardon. Tell us.
I'm a trained artisan, so quality and the fact that I've been with supply chain for 22 years, going out, and I was responsible for half of that time for the quality myself. I knew what the
Right.
standard was for the quality that we required.
Right. Thank you for correcting me. So you, in fact, did have knowledge in this. So the quality issues that were raised about LMT, were those that you personally had identified, or did other people in other departments raise that with you?
The quality department did raise it, but I also had ondervinding or
Experience.
the experience, that's
Yeah.
correct, yeah.
Right, thank you. And then we now get to what DLS management decided. You say here that they decided that a normal procurement process be followed to secure a supplier. Nevertheless, LMT was still considered a potential supplier, even though it did not enjoy any preference by DLS. Now, as I understand your evidence, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying here is that it might have been a good idea to get the work done by LMT, but there were some concerns about quality. It would have been a good idea because it was within the Denel stable or group, correct?
That's correct.
You would have kept the money within the group, was the point you made earlier. But instead of doing that, it was decided, no, let's go out on an open procurement process because we have some concerns about LMT quality.
That's correct.
But LMT would still be in the race. It would still be a horse in the race. It could tender if it wished to do so.
That's correct, yes.
Right. Now, you then set out in paragraph 19 and 20 variants of the particular combat vehicle, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Then you deal specifically at page 92, just remember the page numbers top left, from paragraph 21 with the process that was followed by the procurement of the Hoefyster platform hulls supplier. Now you referred to a 3 quotation basis, and you mentioned a moment ago to the chair, 3 quotations were in fact received. This was not an openly advertised public tender where everybody out in the marketplace could tender, is that right?
Yeah, we've been working on 3 quotes all our lives. Tenders only started coming in since, I think, 2014, 2015. They started talking about tender processes.
Right.
So we've been using 3-quote system basically my whole 22 years that I was there.
Right. And this was around 2011 that this started, you say in paragraph 22, for the Hoefyster platform hulls.
That's correct, yeah.
Right. Now, you mentioned a budgeted price per hull of being 950,000 rand per hull, exclusive of that, and the total budget would then have been in the region of 206 million rand.
That's correct.
Now, then you refer to the fact that there was no previous supplier or last purchase price information. Why was that?
It's, well, basically because we haven't bought any hulls on previously, and only after stuff has been bought, then you start get system history on the system, which give you last purchase prices and all that kind of information.
Right. And then you explain why, how you went about choosing who to send the request for proposals to. Just explain to the chair briefly what that involved.
Yeah, basically we had a supplier database, and with the experience and background that I had, plus my colleagues, could determine which suppliers currently in the database has got the ability and capability to manufacture these heavy structured hulls. And working through that and getting the inputs, it was decided on 4 suppliers, which was then LMT, VR Laser, BAE Systems, and DCD Doorbell.
Those are the entities you referred to in paragraph 27.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And then you deal with their background, how they had been dealing with DLS or MEChem. Is it MEChem or MEChem?
MEChem.
MEChem.
That's
What is MEChem?
They were doing landmine lifting and clearing, landmine clearing department, and dog training and.
Right. Now may we turn to page 94, paragraph 30. You refer to an RFO, a request for offers, specifically for the hull manufacturing on the Hoefyster project, or contract. And did you then send out the RFO?
I did.
Was that your personal action to send it out?
No, I got an email from Mr. Rian Badenhorst with attached RFO that I was supposed to send to the 3 suppliers.
And did you in fact send it to them?
I did, yes.
Was it to the 4 suppliers that have been mentioned or to 3?
Only to 3 is BAE Land Systems at that stage was sort of competition for Patria, and they requested us not to give them their IP. So they were removed from the list.
Right. So it was sent to LMT, VR Laser, and DCD.
That's
right?
correct.
And then you refer to their responses, that each of those entities sent in a response in response to the RFO. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you give the dates in paragraph 32 to 35, and you've attached them as annexures. And we apologize to you for some of the annexures being missing from the file in front of you due to the slip-up in the photocopying process, but that will be fixed. But we thank you for providing all of those documents, and they will be provided, as you've heard, in due course to the chair in the way that we've discussed.
Okay.
Now, can we deal on page 95 with a visit by Patria to the suppliers? Just briefly, what does this relate to?
Okay, that, as far as my knowledge on that is that Patria came to visit the identified suppliers in South Africa that DLS has identified, and to give us their input due to their background and the fact that they have manufactured so many of them already, of who will be, according to them, be the best supplied and with the best capabilities.
Right.
To manufacture the hull.
Now, on page 96, the next heading is updated request for offers. Now, you refer to an email from Ms. Malashlela. She was the head of supply chain at DLS, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Did you report to her?
I had a line manager between me and her.
And who was the line manager?
At that stage, 2014, I think it was either Mr. De Pree or Cindy Minor. I'm not sure which one of the two.
Right,
But
thank
there
you.
was a line manager between me and Celia.
And then there's reference to a request made to LMT to update their proposal. Did you attend to that request made to LMT?
Just explain by attending to it.
Well, let me get straight to the letter. Chair, this is an example of where the annexure that Mr. van den Heever helpfully attached to his affidavit has not come in the photocopying, but fortunately we have another copy of the same letter elsewhere in the same bundle. So Mr. van den Heever, if I can take you to page 253, been attached to Mr. Dreven's affidavit. We don't need to look at his affidavit. If I can just ask you to look at 25325. So, Chair, again, this is just for the record. It's in bundle Denel 04 from page 253.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, this is a letter that bears your name on page 255 as the procurement officer DLS Mechem. Is that right?
That's correct. That's actually the RFQ, but yeah.
Is that the RFQ itself? Oh,
That's correct, yes.
I'm sorry, I had the wrong page number given. So is that the actual RFQ before the request for
Quotation.
updated proposals?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. It appears my note was wrong. It's apparently 252 is the one that I should have drawn your attention to.
Okay,
So-
252 is the letter from Celia.
Yes, thank you. So this was the request for an update of LMT's proposal.
That's correct, yes.
Now, why were they being requested to update?
Because the previous quote that we received was, I think, in 2012. And then in 2014, the request came through to update their quotations.
Yes.
So after 2 years, you would expect a change in price, so that's why we request the update.
And then in the letter, the text of the letter, you say, Denel Land Systems, DLS, hereby requests LMT to submit an urgent update of your proposal number received on, and here is the answer to your question, to your point earlier about when it was received, 2012, that's confirmed, 9th of February 2012. We do, however, require you to amend the quotation as follows when updating armor hull breakdown. A, price for armor hull excluding mine protection. B, price for mine protection only. And C, prices should exclude all jigs and fixtures. CFI, which will be contracted separately. And then you refer to a tender representative visiting Patria in Finland, etc. So as I understand it, when they were updating their proposals, they were expected to break it down into various elements. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, this letter was sent to LMT. Was a similar letter sent requesting an update to the other two that you had received proposals from? That's VR Laser and DCD.
That's correct, yes.
Right. And did they in fact respond, all these three potential suppliers?
Yes, they did. Just one thing is, we first sent the updated request to LMT, and then a week later, we got confirmation from Partja, of which we were waiting for, to say that we can continue with the rest of the suppliers in South Africa that we've identified. And we received that letter on the 6th of I think it was June 2014. And then we sent exactly the same RFQs to all three of the suppliers and informing LMT that their response date is also extended to the same as the other two suppliers.
Right, and the Patria point is mentioned by in your affidavit, paragraph 45, page 96. Is that correct? Page 96,
Yeah,
top left, paragraph 45.
that's correct, yes. Yeah.
Now, why did Patria have to give you the go-ahead for parties other than LMT?
That was like where we identified the four suppliers and where they came back and they said, sorry, OMC is not acceptable, or BAE Land Systems is not acceptable supplier.
Yes.
And we just had to confirm with them that this is now the three suppliers that we're going to, and get confirmation from them that we can go to them. So we got the letter back from them that said that they were happy with the suppliers.
The Commissioner's already heard evidence that Patria was the original manufacturer of this type of equipment
That's
and
correct.
had some intellectual property, they had patent rights, etc.
That's-
And is that why they were saying, we're not happy if you do business with BAE, because then they could get our intellectual property, and you had to check with them that the rest of the list was acceptable?
That's correct, yes.
Right. Had they already approved LMT?
Yeah, because LMT was part of Denel, they had no problem with them.
Right. Now, if we can turn to the next page, 97, paragraph 50, you refer to the revised proposals or their responses that you received. Is that in response to the request for an update?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, and that you set them out in paragraph 50.1 to 50.3,
That's correct.
and you've referred to the relevant attachments. Then you deal with paragraph 51 with the pricing that you received in terms of these updated responses. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And then just to get to the sort of bottom line, or the point that you've highlighted in bold print, in LMT 51.1.3, their total price that LMT quoted was 159 million plus a few thousand.
That's correct,
Right.
yes.
And then VR Laser, their bottom line, the total price 5122 was 262 million
That's
and
correct.
some thousands. So they were more than 100 million more expensive than LMT, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And DCD, you've set out a schedule, and their total price for the contract we see at the top of page 101 was 301 million and some thousands.
That's correct, yes.
So it ranged from, the cheapest was LMT 159 million, VRL 262 million, and DCD 301 million.
That's correct.
Right. Then you refer on page 101 to the bid evaluation committee, which was also known as the cross-functional team. And is it correct that Ms. Malashlela, as the head of the DLS Supply Chain Management Department, organized for a BEC, a bid evaluation committee or cross-functional team to be appointed?
That's correct, yes.
And you were one of those members.
That's correct.
And those members are set out in paragraph 55.1 to 55.10.
That's
Is that
good.
right?
That's correct.
And you're the person mentioned in 55.10, and you've already made the correction of 55.5, and we've dealt with Mr. Rakudukwe's spelling issue. Right. Now, you mention in your affidavit that the committee was chaired by Ms. Malashlela, correct?
That's correct.
And its purpose was to evaluate the responses from the three suppliers. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And these responses were not simply the responses you'd received in 2012. They were as updated in 2014.
That's correct, yes.
Right. With the total cost that we've seen already from 159 to over 300 million.
That's correct, yes.
Right. Now, Mr. van den Heever, you then deal in paragraph 57 with a feedback session on the 26th of June, and you refer to an attendance register which was signed for VR Laser's feedback session, but you say in 58, paragraph 58, we neglected to have it signed when DCD and LMT appeared before the committee. I don't think anything will turn on the register not being signed. What I'm interested in, Mr. van den Heever, is this. Was there a single feedback session for all three to attend, or was there a separate feedback session for each of them separately?
Yeah, there was a separate feedback on the same day, different slots.
Right. If I might just have a moment. Yes, can I take you to page 387? Chair, again, just to explain, this is an annexure that we find attached to Mr. Dreven's affidavit for the same reason discussed earlier. Page 387, do you have it?
Okay, no, that's fine.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, I've got it.
And so this is the one for VR Laser. And you see the names and signatures of the various people, including Ms. Malashlela at the top there.
That's correct.
And is that your name? If we look at the handwritten portion, the sixth person to write and sign appears to be your name, and is that your signature?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then what follows is a list of a number of people from VR Laser.
That's correct.
Correct. Right, now, what was the purpose of this feedback session?
Okay, the process, like I said, it was something new to us. On the 25th, when we received the quotations, the BEC got together and they worked through all the quotations, and as they worked through it, they were looking at some stuff that needed clarity. They had questions about it. Was painting included? So there was various questions working through the quotes, and working through them, we drew up a list of questions that we need to ask the suppliers just to clarify on their quotations. So the next day, on the 26th, they were invited to come and give clarification on their quotation. So each supplier came in at a certain time, and we asked them the questions that came up in their quotes, and they gave us the answers, and they were each then asked to update their quotes with that latest information and verduidelijking,
Explanation.
with the explanation for that, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. It certainly does, Mr. van den Heever. May I just ask one further question before we take the adjournment that you proposed for 1:15?
Yes.
Chair? Thank you. May I take you again as an annexure to Mr. Dreven's affidavit, although it should have been attached to yours as well because of the problem in-house here. Can I take you to page 389?
Yes,
What is that?
that was the list. This specific list on 389 was the questions that was raised with VR Laser regarding clarification required on their quotation.
And then at the following page 390, is that a similar questionnaire?
Similar questionnaire, but on top you will see that's for DCD.
Yes, so it's different questions specific to your queries about their proposal.
That's it, and it indicates what time they were supposed to be.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Chair, would this be a convenient time to take the adjournment?
Yes, it will be. I think I must just say I agree with you, Mr. Kennedy, that Mr. van den Heever's command of English is very good. So
It is.
I think it's good that he agreed to testify in English. There are no glitches, and We understand him very well.
So can I fire her?
We won't complain.
But may we, as the legal team, just express our thanks to Mr. van den Heever for his attitude on this
Yes,
and
yes.
everything else.
Yes.
And his attorneys.
And his
too.
attorneys, yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you. Okay, we'll take the lunch adjournment. We'll resume at 2:15. We
Thank you, Chair.
adjourn.